What are the different categories of angels and what roles do they play?
There's a hierarchy. There's the lesser ones. You have the cherubs who are guarding the entrance. You have the messenger ones. You have, like the higher archangels that are mentioned, like Archangel Michael, for instance, is the head of that army. You have Archangel Gabriel, right? That's always there delivering, news. And so I think that in this is my personal opinion, I see them much like archetypes. I see them as all having different roles. However, I do believe that a lot of the angelic energy that is spoke of is, I hate to say alien, but extraterrestrial. Because, if you thought of the definition of an angel and a definition of an alien, what's the difference?
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Ask Julie Ryan Show. It's where we blend spirituality and practicality to help you live a life of purpose and joy. We have Shanna Vavra with us on the show today, and we're going to be talking about angels. Shanna is an intuitive, and she's the host of the Sense of Soul podcast. Shanna says there are countless arch and other angels beyond those mentioned in the Bible. I'm eager to discover why these celestial beings were excluded, who they are, and how they might assist us mere mortals in leading better lives. Please remember to subscribe, leave a comment, and share this episode with your family and friends. Now let's go chat with Shanna.
Shanna, I am so thrilled to have you on the show today. Thanks for taking the time to join us.
I am so just very honored to be on your show and excited to talk to you today.
As I mentioned before we started recording, I want today to be all about angels. So I got lots of questions for you, my girl, about angels.
Well, that's an exciting topic.
My first one is you communicate with angels and say there are many more archangels and other types of angels than the Bible references. Why do you think they were omitted?
Well, I have to be honest, when I first was kind of awakening, I picked up the Bible first because this is my religion. I'm very deeply rooted Catholic. So I kind of wanted to read it with fresh eyes. And I was living by my own experiences and wanting to really have what I believed in be my truth. So when I really picked it up, I didn't get past the first few chapters before I said, wait a minute. The angels slept with Adam's daughters?
What?
Yeah. Right?
It says that in the Bible?
In Genesis, in the beginning. Yeah.
Wow.
And so that's, yeah. I think that what amazes me, I think most Christians, they don't know that. And I think that they're also the ones who probably haven't read most of the Bible.
But they can quote certain verses.
True. It's kind of like it's what we've been told to believe and what we've been told to focus on. It's been selected. And when I really did read that, it stumped me. And then I thought to myself, well, does that make us like hybrid? You know what I mean? And are angels aliens even? This was what I was thinking. And then, I kept going and I read about how we know that this made God upset, actually. So he clearly says, I told you not to sleep with Adam's daughters, and you did. So then now there's this defiance, and this is the whole reason of the flood. And so it's the destruction of this hybrid. But when I came across the Book of Enoch, which did not make the cut in the Bible, however, it is in the Ethiopian version of the Bible. So they kept that book, the Book of Enoch. And the Book of Enoch is nothing but angel stories. It's nothing but like the army of God. And it talks about the story of when Noah was born. And even though we know that it was Noah and his family that were the ones kind of to be chosen to continue the human race, his birth sure did sound very suspicious. So Enoch was his grandfather, and tells the story in the Book of Enoch that when he was born, he was one of those. And he was so bright and white, and it like lit up the whole house. It was like this miraculous birth. Now, that was pretty shocking as well. Why would that be taken out of the Bible? It sounds like a very important story. But I think that it was all the rest of the things in the Book of Enoch, which were all the other angels that maybe we've heard of even. We've heard the names of these angels, but yet they're not names that are actually in the Bible.
Okay, let's back up for a minute. First of all, Book of Enoch. Do we know who wrote it?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think probably the same author as maybe Genesis.
Okay.
It would
And
be.
when you talk about it was left out, who left it out? How go back to how was the Bible put together? And I know it's had several iterations in
Yeah.
several languages, and I know that the translations have changed some of the meanings. And
Oh,
I know
yeah.
it's the inspired word of God is what it is. But and so I just want to spend just a couple minutes on this because I really
Yeah.
want to focus on the angel part of it. But I think you bring up a real good point. I'd never heard that. I was raised Catholic too, 12 years Catholic schools.
Exactly.
And I think the Catholics do just a fantastic job of preparing us for this spiritual woo-woo stuff. Because as little children, we're taught about angels, our guardian angels, our saints, the Holy Spirit, all of that kind of stuff, right? Whereas
That,
people that aren't exposed to that as little children, they're starting on a different place than
yeah,
where we were raised. I at 65 can still recite the angel of my guardian angel prayer because I said it every night
that,
as a kid before I went to bed.
yep,
So
exactly.
I think they've done a really good job, but I never heard about the hybrid thing. So doesn't sound like that was edited out. That's still in Genesis.
Oh, yeah, it's right there. It's right there. There's so many things I have found, especially in religion, that are hidden in plain sight, but yet we didn't see it, or maybe we weren't in a place that we could receive it. Because I even remember reading, that's those same passages, just reading with new eyes the entire story of Garden of Eden is total. I receive it totally different now. So I think it's important for myself to not ever just really assume what what I was told to believe, rather me go and actually experience and read it for myself, be that kind of truth seeker and really receive it for myself. Because how, like in the book of The Alchemist, right? You could read it so many different times and receive so many different things. And the Bible is living in that way, I believe, as well.
Well, I think it was written purposely that way because scholars have been dissecting and pontificating on its meaning for, God, eons. The New Testament for a couple thousand years, but the Old Testament and the Torah and all that jazz, way, way longer than that. And I believe that it was written that way for us to ponder and to come up with what does it mean today? How does it apply to our life personally? How does it apply to humanity? But back to my question, why were certain things left out, do you believe?
So it is, in my opinion, this was intentional, right? I think that some of them didn't actually match the narrative that they were going with. Some of the books, I mean, there's many, many books, the apocryphal text, or, even like you mentioned, the Gnostic Gospels, which I fell into and found very much to be true to what you just said, that there were like parables or allegorical stories, and they bring you inward. They're very deep. And you can tell there is this rawness, though, of the Gnostic Gospels because they haven't been touched by hierarchy, right? They're more original than, the many translations and the many hands that the Bible has gone through. But originally, when Constantine had ordered the Bible to be created, it was because there were so many different beliefs going around. So he wanted to kind of unite the people and make them all believe really in one word. And the most amazing thing I think I found in the Gnostic Gospels was that there was much more feminine
Well, some
aspect.
believe that Mary Magdalene wrote it.
Well, she does have her own book, the Book
Right.
of Mary, in the Gnostic Gospels. I love that book. But there's so many, right? I mean, Jesus had many disciples, not just Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and so they all did also have their own Gospels, many of them. My favorite one is the Book of Thomas. And I'll tell you, you growing up Catholic and going to Catholic school, I've had many conversations with my mom because, she too can recite all of the prayers. And there's many angels that are mentioned and many stories that are mentioned, say, in like catechism that are not actually in the Bible. One, for instance, is Mother Mary's story, her parents, right? Joachim and St. Anne. But how would you know who St. Anne is? She's not mentioned in the Bible. But she is mentioned in apocryphal text and also in some Gnostic Gospels. So that to me is interesting. And her story was so amazing. As a child, she was sent to live at the temple at 3 years old. I mean, St. Anne herself had a miraculous birth. I mean, it's a beautiful story. And you know where else it is told? In the Quran. And I compared 3 different Gospels. The one of them is called the Gospel, it's the Nativity Gospel. And another one, I forget all 3 of the names right now, because as I get older, I forget these things. But the other one was the Quran, and I compared the 3 stories. Well, the 2 stories that were in the Gnostic text and the apocryphal text, you could tell were the same story, but told from a different perspective, but still the same story. And then the Quran validated it. And the only thing different was really the names were a little bit different because, one was, I think one of the texts was originally written in Greek and then another, and theirs was written in their language. So the names were different, but the exact same story.
Weren't the Gnostic Gospels found in ceramic jars buried in the desert by some archaeologists? Am I remembering that correctly? Because I saw fragments of them, of the papyrus. I've seen them more than once in different museums where they're making, they're like make a tour through America or something. I believe I saw them the first time maybe in the Metropolitan Museum in New York. And then I want to say I may have seen them here in Birmingham. And it's amazing to see those things because they've got the fragments of the papyrus mounted, and they're of course in temperature and light controlled special enclosures to protect them. But when I was in the room, the vibration in there was just off the charts.
I have experienced this.
Yeah.
With the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Right.
I almost had to leave that room.
Same thing.
I almost had to leave.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So same thing. Didn't like some shepherd boy find him out in a jar someplace, like
very deep in the Nagamati. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that wasn't the first time.
Nagamati?
Oh, that's in Egypt. Nagamati. And then they named them like the Nagamati Library. But, there were other texts that was found prior. And, what I find is interesting is that most of them were in like a code, like the codex, like a code. And, that tells me something else too, that they were having to truly hide this because this was heresy, right? To read these books. And they are just as old, they say, it is just up for arguments, but they say some of them are as old as, the books that we are reading in the New Testament. And I think that I also did not know as a Christian that Paul himself, he didn't know Jesus. And he wrote the majority of the New Testament. So the Gnostic text, though, there was also some found in the 1700s. I want to say it was the 1700s. And then you have other pieces in the Nag Hammadi that kind of almost were puzzle pieces that were putting the stories together even more. But one of the stories that I fell in love with, that I was definitely led by so much synchronicity, was to know Sophia, which in Greek means wisdom. But as in the Old Testament, in Proverbs, Solomon spoke of wisdom as she. And he had this great love for wisdom. And she was there, it describes in Proverbs 22 when God made the earth. And so in the Gnostic Gospels, Sophia is also she, but she takes on more of a divine feminine mother god role. And that to me is one of the reasons why I think those Gnostic Gospels were left out. The other part is that these were secret teachings of Jesus. And this is at the beginning of many of the Gospels, like it'll say, in the Book of Thomas, it says, these are the secret teachings of Jesus. They're like quotes of Jesus, which are very similar to the New Testament, but also have a different flavor. For instance, the kingdom is outside of you and it's also inside of you. And when you come to know yourself, then you will be known.
Yeah. Interesting. I think that stuff's fascinating.
Me too.
I love the historical stuff. And
Me
I love to
too.
see how our interpretation based on the English version, the King James version or whatever, and then what it meant in the original language in which it was written, which is Aramaic. And a lot of times it's not the same thing.
No.
And I think that's all fascinating. Well, back to angels, because that's what I want to focus on with you today. Why do you think some of those angels were left out? Was it because of the hybrid thing? Was it because why? I mean, angels are such an integral part of everything in the Bible.
Yeah.
And so why would they leave that out? Was it just they wanted to condense it, or what do you think's going on with that?
Well, first of all, angels are not Campbell's soup kids, like we assumed either. And that was shocking for me too, because I can tell you right now, Archangel Michael looks like Brad Pitt in my mind, right? He definitely does. However, seraphims and cherubs, these are described as, seraphim, I think, have 6 wings, 3 different faces, or 4 faces, on the cherub. They're frightening. There is no doubt that this is why every time an angel went to visit someone in the Bible, they said, fear not, because they were fearful looking. They were not, and this is right there in the Bible. I mean, this is described in the Old Testament. They definitely were not, looking like that. But it also described that in one place that Archangel Michael was like he was handsome. They made a reference to. But Lucifer, right, was known as being beautiful or having that characteristics. But, there would have been no going around the whole hybrid thing if the Book of Enoch would have been in there, because there's so much of that. Then there's also so much war. And it's done pretty much interdimensionally, which also I've talked to many rabbis who say many of those stories they've always known were interdimensional, some of the stories that are told in the Old Testament. I believe, like, even, when you hear, I think it was the story of when Israel, became Israel, is it Joshua's son who became Israel? There was like this battle between him and I want to say some sort of interdimensional being. And that was done in a different dimension. It was, many of the stories were almost, some of them are dreams. And also some of them may have even been under the influence of some sort of psychedelic. Because the rabbis used to go into, and they still do, into caves, and they would burn acacia wood. And this acacia wood they would stay in the cave until it burnt out to nothing. And this is a hallucinogen. This is a psychedelic wood. So they were getting high, right? Acacia wood.
Like
Yes.
Akashic Records?
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? Kind of too. Yeah.
Wow.
So, yeah, and they would stay, they'd be all high.
You're
And then,
blowing my mind, and I've just been talking to you for less than 20 minutes. Back
crazy.
to the bit about, you're right, and I never thought about it before. Whenever an angel appears, it's like, fear not.
Fear not, Mary. Woo.
And I always thought it was just because Mary was seeing this, winged being of light going, whoa, what's that all about?
Right.
But you bring a new perspective to it, that maybe not only was it glorious looking, but in some instances, perhaps it was really frightening looking if it had 3 faces or 6 sets of wings or stuff like that. I've never heard that before. I haven't seen it, but here's what I think. I'd love to hear your take on it. When I see angels, I see them like a Catholic girl sees angels, because that's what I was taught they look like. I went to St. Michael's School in Columbus, Ohio. We had statues of St. Michael's and pictures of St. Michael all over.
There, right, all over my room even. Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah.
Right.
Interesting. Fascinating.
Yeah. And, Archangel Michael is a huge part of, he is the captain. He's the head of this army, So really, you hear about the angelic, there's this war. So that's the other thing. I think that the Book of Enoch, it leaves out a huge chunk of that, right, of the angel part. And so when there are references to certain things in the Bible, once you have read that book, it makes sense. So
such as?
Well, even in the New Testament, I want to say Jesus makes reference to something that would have been directly from the Book of Enoch. Yeah. So there's, and even just like, there's no arm, there's a war, but there's no war talked around the Bible. This is what happens a lot with the actual Bible. You hear about things, and in the angelic realm, I mean, certain, like Archangel Raphael is not, I don't believe he is in the Bible. There's many of those archangels that Catholics worship and have made known, but they're not in the Bible. I believe maybe Raphael is, but not, I think Raphael, Archangel Michael, and Gabriel. Those are the only 3 mentioned. And then there are some in the Catholic Bible, maybe, that are still there. There's a few stories, but there's so many more angels.
Go through all them later. I want to ask you about all those
archangels. There's so many. They are, though, in the Book of Enoch. There's tons. And there's also these dark ones, too.
What are the different categories of angels, and what roles do they play?
There are many different, there's obviously some sort of like patriarch system, that they have. There's a hierarchy. There's the lesser ones. You have the cherubs who are guarding the entrance. You have the messenger ones. You have, like the higher archangels that are mentioned, who seem like Archangel Michael, for instance, is the head of that army. And this, and then you have, and also he's supposed to come back and save everybody as well, along with Jesus in Revelation. You have Archangel Gabriel, right? That's always there delivering, news to, seems a lot of times, to people who are pregnant, because he also went to Mary's mother. He also went to Elizabeth, that whole lineage. And so I think that in this is my personal opinion. I see them much like archetypes. I see them as all having different roles, all of the known archangels. However, I do believe that a lot of the angelic energy that is spoke of is also possibly very, I hate to say alien, but extraterrestrial beings. Because, I mean, if you thought of the definition of an angel and a definition of an alien, what's the difference? You know, they're both interdimensional beings from up there somewhere who would come down, right, and go back up and, you know, could come in between dimensions. You know, they were terrifying looking, you know, or whatever they might have looked like. But I do think that there are bigger angels. Archangel Michael is mentioned around the world. I had on a guest not long ago, Diana. She wrote the book American Cosmic. Plasuka, Diana Plasuka. And she wrote a book recently where she goes and meets this guy and he's just telling her his extraterrestrial experience. And she is also a Catholic professor, and she assumed he was talking about Archangel Michael. He was describing him identically, but he wasn't. He didn't even know who Archangel Michael was.
Wow. Interesting. I never thought about that, but you're right, because they're not human. They're a different form. They're just energy, but it's how we've all been taught to think of them.
Yeah.
And I see the different types of angels in my mind's eye energetically, and they look like how I was taught they look. And that's because it's been my experience, and I'd love to hear your take on this, that spirits are going to show up to us in a way that we can understand who they are and what they're doing. So an archangel to me looks like all those statues of St. Michael's that I grew up with, where he's got the, you know, little Roman skirt thing, and he's got the chest plate, and he's the armor, and he's got those sandals that lace up his calves.
Brad Pitt.
And all of that. Bigger than Brad Pitt in my mind, but handsome. Yeah, absolutely. Yes. And he's got a sword and he's got a shield and, you know, and all of that. Well, somebody that grows up in the Amazon, you know, in an indigenous culture may see it as just a blob of yellow energy or something. So it's been my experience. We're gonna see him. Well, I'm interested too in, you got the archangels and you got the guardian angels. Guardian angels, I've been told a bazillion times from Spirit, stay with us throughout all of our lifetimes and stay with us in the lifetimes in between. Have you heard that as well?
Well, I've experienced something I believe to be true.
Yeah, what's that?
So another thing, you know, when it talked about the four faces of the seraphim, okay?
Which is what? I've never heard of that. What is that?
So this is a major angel, you know, in the Old Testament that goes and, you know, is giving it and actually interacts, you know, with some of the people in the Bible. They have four faces of different animals. So, I mean, it was an ox, an eagle, a lion, and a human. So that also makes, I mean, look at all the different animals that are angelic in other cultures. I mean, look at the Indian religions that, you know, in, where else? I mean, there's lots of this. I mean, Egyptian, you know, there's a lot of different beings or deities that are also these hybrid, half animal, half human.
You're saying half animal, half human. I'm thinking of what's the half man, half horse. What's that called?
Yeah, the centaur. Lots of mythology, right? Lots of Greek mythology included in this and all the things.
Even in Harry Potter. I mean, modern day, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
In the world.
And I mean, and so Christianity had this too. You know, it just, for some reason, no one read that part of of that. But actually, I'll be honest with you, there are very old churches, one called Hagia Sophia in Turkey, which was once the center of Christianity. People don't usually know that as well, but that's where the center of Christianity was. And that's where it was created, in Turkey. And the Hagia Sophia has original art of what they looked like. They have the 4 faces, and they have the, 6 wings, and they have the ring-like, angelic beings. They have real depiction of what they are described in the Bible. I find that very interesting. It is now a mosque, but they did keep some of that old, original artwork that shows that. And I thought that was very amazing. My best friend just went and sent me pictures, and I was like, oh, I'm going to live vicariously through you. But
so back to the different categories. So we've got the archangels, and then what? Guardian angels?
Oh yeah, the guardian angels. Okay, so I had a past life regression once, and I had been doing a lot of meditation. I kept seeing this monk in my dreams and in my meditations. And it was a friar, like the brown robe, and he was bald. But he never talked to me. And I just thought it was kind of silly that I'd been asking for a spirit guide or a sign of something like that. And I just get this mute monk. So I have this past life regression and in between life session. And this is like about 8 years ago. And I found out his name was David. And maybe he had a vow of silence is what we kind of just assumed. But he called me by my soul's name, which was really amazing. He called me Nia, which was random. But I've done a lot of, different meditations to connect with them, and never would he ever talk to me. But I had a dream about him a few months ago, and I haven't seen him in years. And I was like, oh my gosh, aren't you my spirit guide? And he turns around and he goes, no, you're my spirit guide. And I was like, what?
Yeah. Wow.
And I felt like the most deadbeat spirit guide ever, because had I known, I would have been, I don't know. Yeah, it was pretty amazing.
So your spirit was his spirit guide, and there have been many, many scholars who've said that they believe that, and have been told maybe by spirit too, probably, that a huge portion, perhaps the biggest portion of our spirit stays in heaven, in non-physical, and then slivers of our spirit incarnate into this human life, and perhaps multiple lifetimes all happening concurrently, which makes my head want to explode, because I don't understand that. But I just go to the place of, well, I'll understand it when I get back to heaven. I don't have to understand it now. I just have heard it so much that I go to, well, is it feasible? Yeah, it's feasible. So do I understand it? No. Am I supposed to? Probably not. So there's that. But all right. So we got archangels, guardian angels. Then what? What's a seraphim? What do they do?
Well, I believe they're just, messengers, but they are important enough to be mentioned, but they're also these hybrid animals, in man. So, and I think actually the seraphim does not, I think it's the cherub that has, the faces. I might be having it wrong.
Well, and the cherubs look like little pudgy,
Campbell soup kids.
European babies. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely not. They would be terrifying.
Really? But is it interesting that those cherubim are depicted as chubby little European, Caucasian babies because of that hybrid thing? I never thought about that before.
Right.
Because this is the first time I've ever heard of it.
There's so much. I found that was my whole thing. I think what really led me to where I'm at today is being curious, right? And stepping out of that heresy, because heresy means choice in Greek. And I think that we're now at a sovereign place where we can be we can think for ourselves, and we can make a choice to, just do a little research and read things for the first time, being able to see something or experience something that you were afraid to before because of, these limitations of what we've been told to believe.
I have many clients over the years who have said, "Oh, I had this horrible dream and this and this and this happened and
Yeah.
and this monster showed up or this evil spirit or whatever." And I said, "Well, all spirits are pure love, first of all. And secondly, when we are trying to interpret something from a dream or from a different reality, and it looks like something that, and we don't have a frame of reference for it, of course it's going to be scary.
Right.
And so we can interpret things. That's why spirit oftentimes will send us signs that we can understand and appear in ways that we can understand, because we immediately go into fight or flight because it's just an autonomic nervous system. We're all programmed with that in our human experience. So something that has three heads that's depicted to us from our human frame of reality, we're like, what? This
Wow.
is really frightening. So I believe that's what's going on there. And perhaps those angels to those old masters and those sculptors, Leonardo da Vinci and all his buddies, those angels and those images were depicted to them. They channeled those images so that they could do something that would perceive to be beautiful by humans. Does that make sense?
It is. And also, do we have such a warped kind of perception on what is beautiful and what is not? Even age, right? As I get older, I look at myself and, I've got all of these wrinkles and things. And, do I go and plump them up, or do I just, really accept that, age is actually wisdom? I think it's beautiful. And, have we been sold, something that maybe is not right? I mean, the whole polarity thing within the Bible is pretty interesting, and even more in the Gnostic text. The angels described in the Gnostic text are a little bit different. In the Pistis Sophia, Pistis meaning faith, Sophia meaning wisdom, and also the apocryphal text of John, there's a lot, and also many other texts, there's a lot talked about the aeons. And some there's 12, some there's 7, but the story is that, there's this essence, this energy of God, basically, mass source energy, who basically sees as a reflection of himself in what our cells do, actually, and creates a feminine version of himself, kind of like an opposite. And together, then, they create, you could call them archangels, because they all do have different names, like all of the virtues, right? And they also have counterparts. So they're not just male, right? Or, they all have a counterpart. And, you have Archangel Michael. There's not actually, well, there is an Archangel Michael, but there is also his feminine as well. So that's the one thing that's much different, I think, in the Gnostic Gospels. And I love that about the Gnostic Gospels, because we do often just think as, the archangels as masculine and protectors and male.
Yeah. Well, when you started talking about that story from the Gnostic Gospels, I'm thinking, well, that's the Adam and Eve story.
Oh, they have their own Adam and Eve story. And it's definitely nothing like
no apples involved.
No, there is apples involved.
Oh,
but
well,
it is,
there you go.
The lesser Sophia, who is the last of the aeons, who does not have her counterpart with her, and she creates something, and it turns out to be not so good. And so when she creates it, it's this lion-faced serpent named Yaldabaoth, and she kicks it out of the heavens or the pleroma, and because it cannot live in that dimension, the highest dimension, that they were in. So now she's stuck out of it too. And this creation, Yaldabaoth, has just enough energy or divinity within him to make something that is 3D. That's all he can do. And he creates a 3D world. And she goes down there and says, "What are you doing?" And he says, "Look, I'm a creator. I can create things." And there's this blob on the ground that's supposed to be a man. And she blows into it and says, "Rise, man, rise." So there's a totally different story.
Well, two thoughts on that. First of all, what's an Aeon? Is that
It's
just an
just their name
energy?
of an angel. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that story that you told and some of these other ones that you're talking about, they're all metaphors with a bigger meaning. They're like
Absolutely.
parables.
Yes.
Like the whole Bible is
Yep.
full of parables. A
Total.
priest whom I love, I've had him on the show, Father Shanna Vavra, who's an Irish priest whose grandmother was a mystic and his grandfather was a druid. He grew up in Ireland.
Wow.
Fascinating guy. And he has his PhD. He's a psychologist. And he also, I think he has his doctorate in math too, like super, super smart. And he dissects the Good Samaritan story. And he says, if you dissect this and you could go back to that time and you went to the innkeeper where the Samaritan came and brought the injured man and said, "Hey, take care of this guy and I'm going to come back." He goes, that never would have happened ever in that time. But you get the gist of the story from the parable.
Right.
And I think that's what people have been interpreting in different ways since the beginning of time. And it's not so much what's the interpretation, but what's the bigger meaning here? What does it mean to you?
Right.
And how do you integrate that into your life to help you live a life of purpose and joy, basically?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And it just disappoints me that some of the stories that are found that didn't make the Bible are so beautiful and so powerful for women. Like the story of Lilith, who many rabbis have told me, you need to redeem Lilith. She was Adam's first wife. So, it is known, very well known.
Adam had a first wife? What, Eve was his second wife?
Okay, remember Jesus was Jewish, so he would have known Lilith, right? And the other is Naraya.
Whoa. Back up.
I know.
Adam had a wife before Eve?
Yeah, Lilith.
And her name was Lilith.
And she was cast out, and the 3 archangels went to her in the Red Sea and said, "You either come back and lay before Adam, or we will kill one of your, or like 100 children every day." What's interesting is this also, Lilith, this story is very similar to the story that you'll find in the Epic of Gilgamesh. So it is interesting how a lot of the Sumerian texts actually are, absolutely validating some of the Bible stories, which, gets it a little bit of credit with some of the stories. But a lot of stories, Naraya was one in the Gnostic Gospels you'll find. She was one of Adam and Eve's daughters, and she was amazing. She refused to lay before the animals, the angels that were trying to sleep with, all of his daughters. And she also ended up marrying Noah, and burnt down the ark. That's another part of her story. But these are feminine stories that actually, if I would have known as a child, I would have maybe even looked up to and thought, wow, I want to be independent like them, which also is the real true definition of virgin, is an independent woman.
Okay, I'm confused just talking to you for a half an hour. So I can't even imagine
years.
I can't even imagine what a child would think about that, because she's like, we're taught about Adam and Eve, and then
Yeah.
we find out Adam has another wife, but they're killing children. But I thought that the children started with Adam and Eve, so how could they be killing other children if Adam and Eve had only had like maybe 2 or 3 kids by then? And la 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 la, and on and on. So, all right, let's change topics here, because my brain is all jumbled here. Are angels considered to possess the same power in each of the different categories, just in different roles? Like, for instance, is an archangel more powerful than a seraphim? Is a seraphim more powerful than a cherubim? Is that a thing?
I do think so. I mean, I think that that's the way they were writing it. I'm not sure if I personally buy into that. But yeah, they were definitely trying to show that there was kind of like a military, and there was commanders, right? And there was leaders, and that there was, your soldiers.
All right. How do you communicate with angels?
Well, I must say that, I mean, I called on Archangel Michael most of my life, just like you, right? Boogeyman in my room, calling on Archangel Michael. I used to
Said the
do
prayer,
the
the Archangel
rosary.
Michael
Yeah.
prayer. Yeah.
Yes. And I looked at him, and I still do. If when it came down to it, if I was in a situation where I felt my life was in danger, I'd be calling on Archangel Michael and his sword. After my dad died, my dad's name was Michael. My brother's name is Michael. They used to always get, money every Archangel Michael day. And I'm like, when's Archangel Shanna Day? This is not fair. But after my dad passed, I had many moments, I feel like, in meditation with Archangel Michael, where I felt a different side of him, where I used to see him as this warrior, and I felt very safe with him, but in a loving way. He really comforted me in my meditations. I cried out loud in meditations with him. And I've heard this before with many people, that Archangel Michael has also been that for them, which I was surprised. Early on, I also had an experience with Archangel Gabriel in a meditation, and I didn't know if he was male or female. He was very flamboyant, and I've heard that from other people. And just talking about my experiences, which was brave, because, everybody around me was like, are you nuts? I started to also get a little validation through other people's stories. And I found that, like I said, a lot of them have this archetype around them. And I also see a lot of these archetypes in much of mythology, and I think that either mythology was maybe about them, or maybe they are modeled after mythology. I don't know, but, you'll find a lot of similarities across the board around all cultures.
So you want to have a conversation with Archangel Michael. I just think of him. He immediately comes in.
Yeah.
It's like
Right.
our heads are big salad dishes. Boom.
Yeah.
He's right there. How do you do that? Do you do like you think of him and he arrives? And it's been my experience in hearing this for all these years that angels are spirits. They don't have a gender, but we equate a gender with a name, and they're fine with that. They don't care. But
Yeah.
energy doesn't have a gender. The
Right.
thing that's so funny
Yeah.
about guardian angels, because I'll have clients or somebody call it into the show and they'll say, what's my guardian angel's name?
Right.
And initially when I started doing this stuff, Shanna, they come in with these names that were like either from a dead language or from some language I never heard of or whatever. And it'd be like 15 letters and they were all consonants. And I said, well, how the heck am I supposed to pronounce that or even spell it? And so I said, can you just give me a name that we can use, that this person can use, that's like an American English name, that's easy to pronounce, it's easy to spell? And immediately they'd come in with another name, and now they just do that. And so, is that their actual name? No. Does it matter? No.
Right.
Because when that person thinks of, I want to talk to my guardian angel, whose name's Fred, I'm making that up, immediately in contact with their energy, and names are something that we humans believe are important.
Yes, but I would say that they are, and especially with the archangels. All of them end with L, E-L, and L is God, right, in the Bible. And so that shows that is a group of godly angels, and I think it does. It is
Maybe with
important,
the archangels, but it's been my experience that the guardian angels don't care. They
right?
just want
Oh
to
yeah, probably, yeah, for sure. But I do think that they don't have genders necessarily, but don't you feel, that's how I can identify it, right? Is if Archangel Michael comes in, I could feel that massive energy, that huge energy that is so strong and big. And have you heard of Metatron before, which is
I want to go through all of them.
Enoch.
Yeah, I want to go through all of them with you here in a second. So, and maybe this is a good time to do that. There are 7 main archangels, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Michael, we've talked about him. He's supposedly nearest to God of all of them. And I agree, his energy
Prince of,
feels
the Prince of
really
Peace.
massive.
Right.
Are there female entities that have massive energy too? Absolutely. That's a human
Right.
take on it, in my opinion. So, you think of the Mother Mary, you think of the goddesses, you think of, Saint Joan of Arc, you think of Diana,
Yes.
the goddess of the hunt. Massive, powerful women with that. All right, Gabriel. Gabriel, I think of him as the, news guy. He's coming to Mary, right? He's coming to Mary. He's
I
coming to
love how
stay
you
tonight.
said the news guy. I love that.
In the angel that revealed the Quran to Muhammad too. I mean,
Yes,
he's like,
you're right.
yeah. So he's known for that. All right. Archangel Raphael
Oh,
seems to
yeah.
be a healer from what I remember. Is that what your take on him is?
Right. That loving energy. I agree with you. That loving energy. And was it Raphael that also had the story that is not in it is in the Catholic Bible, I want to say. And he goes on a walk and they go by a river. Gosh, I can't remember the name of the book that it was taken. It's not in everyone's Bible, but I believe it is in the Catholic Bible. But I believe there is a story with Raphael in there. And so for me, whenever I think of him, I kind of think of him as someone who helps you navigate and leads you in that way. But maybe it's just because the story that
I always think of
connected.
him as the patron saint of healing.
Healing too, yeah.
Yeah. Are all archangels saints?
I was just about to say that. So along my journey, I was very curious about saints as well. And I had found that most of the saints are not even maybe real people. So like take Saint Sophia. There's many churches named after Sophia, Saint Sophia. And Sophia is said to have been this martyr with 3 children, hope, charity, and love. But there's no evidence of a Saint Sophia. There's no actual evidence. So same thing I found with Bridget of Kildare, Saint Bridget, who's also Goddess Bridget. So what I noticed is that there is this theme that was happening, that if people were worshiping a certain goddess or person, I think the Vatican said, best we just saint them so, they can still, pray to us or pray through us, their saint. And no, they weren't actual people. And the ones, almost every single one that I was researching, I had found there was no actual historical proof.
Well, Saint Sophia, when you say Saint Sophia, to me, that immediately begs the question, is she better known in the Orthodox religions?
Absolutely.
I would imagine she would be like the Greek and the Russian and the, the Melkite
German.
and the
They even have a serpent hog, which is on my birthday.
What's that, a feast day for her?
Yeah, like her day. Yeah. Well, they have two of them. They have one in that the Vatican, will also, So at one point, I think they did, and then they dropped her, which I understand, because as soon as those Gnostic Gospels became available, you wonder how much information they have in their secret archives.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. We had feast days for saints when I was a kid a million years ago that, we no longer have. So I always laugh with the saying, which I love. Every saint has a past and every sinner has a future. That's hilarious. But
yeah, actually, it's almost Archangel Michael's day. I think at the end of this month. I think it's the 29th.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Uriel. Tell us about Uriel.
Now, see, sometimes, I see right away, I just automatically went to she. Sometimes that energy, that's what I go to. I think the energy can show up feminine and soft, right? But I think they all can probably have that, just as we all should have that. Like I was explaining with Archangel Michael, he can be that powerful, warrior, but he also can be gentle and comforting.
So what's Uriel known for?
Well, I believe for myself, receiving much of that loving energy and compassion. Yeah.
I've read that she's truth and wisdom.
Oh, see, there you go. That's so truth, wisdom, Pistis Sophia, right? Faith Sophia. That's that divine feminine energy, that compassionate, energy that's been missing in a lot. And I hear a lot of people call on her right now. I've been hearing that a lot.
Samuel, Archangel Samuel.
I think that Samuel is one that Catholics actually speak on. That's definitely not in the Bible. I think I hear several. You haven't? Of course, if you have people in your family named after all of the saints, I could name every single one of those names. Are all saints in my family. I feel like Samuel, is he? Gosh,
I think he's love.
I feel like he comes up a lot with like Valentine's Day and twin flame stuff. I'll hear people calling on Archangel Samuel. And I also always think about, which is also, is it Shamiel? Shamiel.
I don't know I don't know if that one, I don't have that one.
Shamiel.
Yeah. Which is probably Samuel.
Right. Yeah. Also, I think of like the harp, or the lyre, but, and I see that as a little bit of feminine energy as well.
We've had people with NDEs on the show multiple times, and Dr. Eben Alexander comes
I've had him on too.
And he talks about the music, that the music took him to higher and higher levels. And I said, did you hear a lot of harps? He goes, no, not really. Because, we're all thinking that they're playing just harp music and because that's how they're depicted.
That's a huge part of my journey, actually, was King David's lyre. In fact, in my book, I write quite a bit about that, because when I did I was trying to figure out why Solomon was so obsessed with Sophia. He wrote a whole book of her, the Book of Wisdom, which also, I believe, is outside of the canon Bible. But I'm sure that if you would have this Ark of Covenant that was so important that, 2 generations were asked to make, this temple for this Ark, that this lyre would have been part of that Ark, because the lyre, it said, when he would play it for King Saul, King David as a little boy, it would like summon these spirits, these evil spirits out of King Saul. And it would create like this, in my mind, I was seeing like this bubble of protection around him. And that's why he always wanted David to play it for him. It was very healing. So I did a research on what the lyre. The lyre is talked about all the way to, other, very ancient stories of like had a lyre. And I always wondered if lyre was connected to like Lyrans, or Lyra, in the constellation Lyra. And, it says that those sounds are solfeggio sounds,
Right. Yeah.
every single one of them.
Right.
So,
It's the
people know
hertz.
now the hertz, yes, absolutely divine healing of all of these different vibrations, which I believe also are probably represented also by different archangels. So, that different feel of different energies.
Well, and you bring up a really good point about the vibration in music, because I was in the medical device hospital supply industry for 30 years as an inventor and manufacturer. And
Wow.
so I still got my fingers in it just because it's so interesting to me. But there are new medical devices and equipment that are being used to break up cancer cells from a frequency standpoint. Certainly the lithotripter, when somebody has kidney stones, they'll put them in water, they'll use sound waves to bust up the kidney stones. It's been used for a long time. I see a really
Yeah.
big connection with that and the solfeggio and higher frequencies,
Even
the
the
Gregorian
chanting.
chant.
Exactly. Stimulating that vagus nerve. All those are so healing.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. Okay, moving on.
Amazing.
Archangel Ariel.
Oh, yeah. Ariel. So this to me absolutely as well is, a feminine to me, and I would say that many times it is Uriel. You'll hear Ariel and Uriel are the same archangel. And she could be male or female. And I've heard that as well.
I hear Ariel and I think of Little Mermaid.
I know, of course. I do too.
But she's known as the protector of Earth, environment, and nature, is what my impression of her is. Archangel, is it Raphael? Jophiel?
Yeah. I think he's the one of music, is he not?
Artists, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sandalphon.
Oh, no. Sandalphon is actually the one who actually has a harp, and he is supposedly like the brother of Enoch or Metatron or Enoch in the angelic form.
Okay. Sandalphon, in my research, some people believe he was the prophet Elijah.
Yeah, I've heard that too.
And then he is known as the angel of music. So Raphael is the patron saint of artists. Azrael is the angel of death.
Well,
is that your understanding?
Yeah, absolutely. And he is mentioned quite a bit in the Book of Enoch.
Well, and you think of the movie Ghost with Demi Moore.
Right? Oh, I
Right?
loved that movie.
And the angel of death is in all classic literature.
Oh, absolutely.
All of the Greek mythology.
And is it scary? Is it scary? I mean, why does it have to be so demonized? I mean, I know for myself, understanding that transition is not a negative thing has been a huge thing off of me, to know that, and it's just like the seasons, it's just transition.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I am from New Orleans, so, I've got voodoo. Marie Laveau was actually is in my ancestral tree. And yeah, so, that
she is known for what?
She's the great voodoo queen. She brought voodoo to America.
Well, New Orleans is just so interesting with all the above ground graveyards and all that stuff going on. And then lastly is Metatron. Tell us about Metatron.
Well, Metatron is mentioned. So in the Book of Enoch, he is said to be Enoch. I've had J.J. Hurtak on, and actually that's a big part of my journey. He and his wife, they translated the Pistis Sophia as well as many other texts. But, Dr. J.J. Hurtak also received the keys of Enoch. Metatron, they say.
Which means what? What does that mean?
The Keys of Enoch is a book that he doesn't like, they don't like to call it downloaded, but he received, or he did, he didn't channel it, he downloaded it and received all of this from Metatron.
That's the same thing.
Pretty much.
Channeling,
Yeah.
downloading. It's
I
all
know.
the same. Yeah.
But it is all this wisdom. I mean, a lot of wisdom and a lot of keys, right, to how we can awaken to our consciousness. And a lot of it is very biblical, it seems. And of course, I believe that he may be Jewish originally, but it's not really for one religion. But there is a lot of talk of Metatron and about the Archangels. And Metatron is supposedly Enoch in his angelic form. Now, I have had this experience many times with Metatron where he comes into my sessions when I do Reiki with younger people, usually Gen X. And it seems like he might be the angel for their generation, if there is one. And his energy is massive, kind of like an archangel, like an Archangel Michael energy. But just for me, I just picture massive. I'm more visual than anything. So I just picture just this massive energy. And when I had that dream where I saw the monk, that was one thing I wanted to know, like, how does he receive me? How does he see me? Does he see me as a color? Does he see my physical body now, who I am? And I never got a chance to ask him, and I still don't know. But, I think that it is kind of amazing that you can probably line up all the colors of the chakras. You could line up all the sounds of the solfeggio, and you could line up all the archangels and their characteristics. And you could probably find all this beautiful synchronization of, harmony. I believe that it all comes together that beautifully.
Yeah. Your monk is calling itself Anthony. Spirits don't have a gender in my experience. They're just energy. And what Anthony showed me was an image of, imagine a horizontal oval where there was an arrow coming towards you from him, and then there was an arrow coming from you to him. So it was a circle of energy that you shared. So the energy from him was coming into you, was being interpreted and assimilated into you, and then it was coming back to him, and it was this constant flow of energy that was going between the two of you. That was the picture he showed me. Yeah. Now I refer to Anthony as a him, he, whatever, right? Because, I've been taught Anthony's a
Saint Anthony. Name. I pray to him every time I lose my keys.
Saint Anthony, exactly. So there's that. I think, and the thing that keeps coming into my head too, Shanna, is that it's important for us not to get lost in the weeds with all this stuff.
Yeah.
Let's go to what's the bigger picture here. The bigger picture here is, regardless of what the parable is or the metaphor, or if Ezekiel is really,
death,
King George VII or whatever, it doesn't really matter. What matters is, what's the big message here?
Yeah.
And the message is, as I'm interpreting it from talking with you today, is we're all connected. We're all part of the divine. We all have spirits that can help us, just if we ask. Doesn't matter if it's Michael. Michael's probably really busy when we think about it from a human perspective.
Absolutely.
But then we have to go to, we're all a speck of the divine. We're all a spark of the divine. And if God is everywhere, always, and we're all a spark of the divine, do we have the same capabilities? Does Archangel Michael do all of the saints and the angels and our deceased loved ones and all of that? When I talk with clients and they say, well, how can my grandmother be with me and all my other 15 cousins at the same time? And I explained, because we're all made in the image of likeness of God in spirit form. We all think God looks like some old man, like Father Time, but I think it's in spirit form. And you've made my head spin with a lot of this stuff, and then I keep hearing in my head, Ryan, don't get lost in the weeds here.
Yeah.
Pay attention to what the bigger picture is that's going on, that's trying to be conveyed, and what was trying to be conveyed at different times throughout history. What was happening in the world? What was the perspective that the masses were going to understand at
Right.
that moment in time? Last question for you. Why do we incarnate?
So I think that my whole journey really has been around what you just said. I think that at one point I really, truly went by what each one of them was supposed to mean, by what I was told, what they meant. And even with like spirit animals or any of those things, I tend to not go to, that dictionary of what it is, and find my truth within myself. And reincarnation was definitely not something I believed in. I wasn't told to believe that. But, like I said, I don't believe that energy can die. I believe this is physics. It can't. It can only transform. And death is only an opportunity to continue for our soul to only evolve further for the greater good of, I believe, humanity, and also maybe for other beings or other purposes that we aren't even aware of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, beautifully said. Something just came into my head just now while you were talking, and that was when you made the point of, I was taught, you pray to Saint Anthony, Tony, look around, something's lost and must be found, right? And we pray to Saint whoever, or we pray to Archangel Michael, or we pray to whomever at any given moment based on what our needs are. The download, I call this divine downloads, that just came into my head, Shanna, was that was intended to get us to focus our energies on a certain frequency, so we would be tuned to the information that was going to come in, that was going to help guide us in whatever it was that we were facing and that we were asking for help about. And I was like, okay, that needs to be mentioned. Yeah, but that makes sense to me.
So much sense to me too.
Yeah.
Bingo. I will never forget what you just said. I just got goosebumps.
Yeah. And back in the day, people were illiterate.
Right.
They couldn't read and write, but they could remember the prophets, and they could remember the angels and the different saints and stuff like that. But it got us to focus our energy, because inevitably you pray to St. Anthony, and what do? You find whatever it is you're looking for.
So weird, right? I'm like, why not do it? Because it works.
Exactly. My mother and both of my grandmothers used to do that all the time.
I still do it. My children do it because it works. But you're right. It's because you're tuning into that frequency that you need for that.
Yeah. For whatever it is, whatever the issue.
Why didn't they just say this?
We wouldn't have understood it at the time.
Right.
We wouldn't have gotten it. You are fascinating. What a fun conversation. I could talk to you for days, girl. How can people learn more about you and your work?
Oh my goodness. So I talk about this kind of stuff all the time on my podcast. I release twice a week on Sense of Soul podcast. I'm writing a book on Sophia, Desperately Seeking Sophia, my journey, which was all divinely led by synchronicity. I didn't really seek any of this. And you can also, go to my website, senseofsoulpodcast.com. My favorite thing to do really is do genealogy and work with the ancestors, breaking those patterns and, healing generations. It's really fun to learn new history. And I don't know, I guess I'm a truth seeker. I'm kind of defiant, but so is Jesus, And so, yeah, that's how it is.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, Well, thanks for taking the time to join us today. Okay, everybody, your heads are probably spinning like mine is after this conversation with Shanna. So in the meantime, sending you lots of love from Sweet Home, Alabama. Mwah!
Thank
And
you.
from Colorado, too, where Shanna is. We'll see you next time.
To enhance your spiritual journey, click on one of the videos below and remember to subscribe, leave a comment, and share with your family and friends.